with 9 and 11, they ended up, more like 12 and a half or a little under 12 and a half calls per day. But the average, equalized out throughout the whole year was about just over 13 calls per day. Of those calls, they're all important. We're not going to minimize the value of any of those calls and the importance of making any of the responses, but we do have to recognize that one, they're not all fires, and two, they're not necessarily all emergency calls as well. 997, so 20% of those were either canceled or false alarms. So right off the bat, of those 4,700 calls, 20% of them were either canceled or they were false alarms. So they show up in our CAD system, but there was no response. 5% of those we're calling non-emergencies, are people like locked out of their cars, problems with animals, jewelry removal, you have a ring stuck on your hand, cable TV lines down, telephone lines down, service calls. About 3% of those were hazardous conditions like power lines down, things like that. 66% were EMS related calls. The nearest we can tell, about 35% of those EMS calls were EMS non-vehicle emergencies. 61% were assisting for an EMS crew. Many of those are lifting folks into the vehicles and otherwise helping the EMS crews out. 3% of those were motor vehicle accident, and about 1% of them were miscellaneous calls like water searches, ice rescues, extrications from elevators, etc. And then 226 calls, or 5% of all of our calls, were fire calls. 17% of those, or 39, were outdoor fires. 26 were vehicle fires, or 12%. 85 were cooking fires, combined, mostly confined to a stove or into a cooking utensil. 60 of them, or 27%, were working structure fires, and 16% were just classed miscellaneous as other fires without a lot more detail. So from my standpoint, I think we're getting mixed messages. I think the only way to boost staffing when multiple firefighters are gone is with off-duty firefighters. For years, we've accomplished that just fine with overtime, and there was no problem with that. There was no unrest as long as people were getting their overtime. But the problem is that practice was far too taxing on our finances. So management had to strive to maintain staffing levels in a little bit more fiscally responsible way. So we focused on trying to reschedule vacations and using the all-call. So when there's an emergency, use the all-call to try to get people here. And if we can, convince somebody to go on vacation at a different day if there's already 3 people gone and a sick call comes in. Our only responsibility has been to demand for more staffing through new hires and or overtime. But benefit time usage, as we showed on the graph, it hasn't been reduced. Benefit time has been stable, if not growing, since we made it known that we needed more people to come in and less people to stack their time. And that's caused further staffing reductions as we've had less folks. So this was one that I shared with you guys back in November. It was a message on the Facebook page for the union. Pretty much said, hey, we can't respond to 2 incidences when they had 11 on duty. And my point was how disingenuous it was, because the very next day we had 3 on vacation with 8 on duty. The next day after that we had 3 on vacation with 1, 6, 7 on duty. Then we had 8 and 7 on duty on Saturday, 8 on duty on Sunday, 8 on duty on Monday, which is all Memorial Weekend, and then back up to 10 on Tuesday. So right here we have them say, hey, we know we can't do it even with 11, but it's not going to change my practices. It's not going to change the way that I utilize my time. Here's a response to our attempt to reschedule some vacations or cancel some vacations. I shared you guys this last time in June. We probably have half a dozen of these, if not more. Again, this was arbitrated, and it was determined that we, in fact, cannot cancel or reschedule a vacation without the employee's consent unless we've gone through and asked everybody if they wanted overtime. And even if we do all that, we're still going to owe them overtime for the day they came in and worked. There's been a lot of issues about October 21st. We had Facebook Live there telling us about how it was staffed. This is what happened on October 21st. We had benefit time usage that forced staffing down to 6 for the very first time. We had 10 scheduled to work that day. We knew at least 10 days in advance that 3 firefighters were going to be absent. We had the option to try at this point, before we had that arbitration ruling, to cancel somebody's ELD day. After talking with that individual, Mr. Morningstar, Chief decided that it was not in our best interest to cancel it. He had a family issue that he wanted to attend to, and we let him leave. And of course, in the morning, firefighter Rosser called in sick, pushing us down to 6. We made the decision, because of timing, that we couldn't request any of these folks to come back to work, and we weren't going to order overtime, so we ran with 6. We did have a house fire that day. The house fire was extinguished extinguished. We had help from Muskegon Heights, maybe from other departments, but the fire got extinguished with 6 of our firefighters on duty. We used the all-call that day, just like we were supposed to. But to set the record straight, we did not reallocate any money from the fire department to the police department. Let's make that pretty clear. We've made that clear over and over again, but that misinformation continues to be spread. Police spending is actually only up about 4.4% from last year, and that's due to vacant positions. Same thing that's going on in the fire department is going on in the police department. Both of them are carrying vacant positions, and actually the police department is carrying more vacant positions than the fire department's carrying. We've committed to keeping status quo throughout the bargaining process. I said that back in June, and we've maintained status quo. Spending for the first 6 months is down only 6% from the previous year, even though we did budget for it to be down more significantly. That's something that I'll have to answer for, because I committed to you guys that I would get the cost down within that $3 million, and we have not gotten it down there yet. Like I said, we're on pace for about $3.6 million. We spent $1.68 million to date compared to $1.78 million last year. So year to date, over 6 months, we've spent $100,000 less on the fire department in 2017 than we did in 2016. There hasn't been this catastrophic cut to the department. The only thing that we stopped doing was filling overtime. People will question that we lost some positions. The reality is we did lose some positions. The problem is when they disappeared from their shift, it was mostly because they decided to work out their last month or their last 6 weeks, burning up their vacation time, burning up their sick time, burning up their ELD days. So, for example, we had one that left to go to Northern Shores, and he let us know he didn't work his last month, essentially. He started there in October. He didn't work a day in September. We had another individual that took a job down in Cutlerville. Turns out he was working there while he was coming here too, and we eventually just had to kind of move him along. But we had a number of them, including recent retirees that happened in July and retirements that happened in December, where their last day on the books might have been at the end of December or at the end of July, but their last day in the office or staffing a shift was well before that. So even though some of the shifts looked like they were short, we were still paying people to be there. They just weren't there. We're not picking on the fire department. That's clear from my standpoint. I don't think it's clear to everybody, but we've done similar reorganizations and cost reduction efforts in every single department at the city. We've eliminated positions, we've moved personnel, we've changed job duties all the way across City Hall to be more responsive to residents. We recently implemented changes to police schedules about 1.5 years or 2 years ago to better serve the community. We moved them on 12-hour shifts. We're not asking anything more from our firemen, our firewomen, than we are asking from any other employee of the city. We're following the same process with the fire department that we did at City Hall. We've identified the issues, we have identified possible solutions, and we've tried to work to resolve them. Only difference is we were able to get them resolved more amicably in other areas. We haven't been able to get an amicable resolution here. But the original goals from that June presentation, we wanted to reduce benefit costs to a more sustainable level. We wanted to reduce benefit time to a more sustainable level. We wanted to reduce guaranteed vacation slots to a more sustainable level. We want to adjust staffing to be more flexible and responsive to call loads. We want to maintain adequate coverage all throughout the whole city. We want to develop a program to improve medical responses. We want to ensure taxpayers are getting what they pay for. We want to make sure that schedule versus actual is what they pay for. If they're paying to have 11 people there, we want to make sure that most of the time they're having 11 people there. But we also want to identify partnerships within the region to improve our services throughout the region. There's been a lot of discussion about the letter that was sent from Muskegon Township about mutual aid. But the reality is every single department here relies on mutual aid. We have more people on our worst day, typically on a normal schedule, even if we're down to 6, than Muskegon Township has on a typical day. We schedule the very best we can, but as it's been, we've been scheduling 9, and we only need help when we don't get our 9 there. And we're not saying that we have to have 9 every single time, but we have to be cognizant of the times when we're getting down to 6 and see what we can do to keep it up to 7 and up to 8. But also we want to ensure that existing personnel have employment. That's what we said we wanted to do in June. As of right now, that is still, from a management standpoint, what we want to do. The reality is that we're running out of time to accomplish all of these things. continuing on from our original budget presentation, our future model has got to be dependent on collective bargaining. The first official meeting was supposed to be held on June 30th, and it was. We met a few times with the group. Again, we didn't come to any resolution, but we said if bargaining went well in 45 days, we would be able to present a long-term vision for fire medical service to the community. Again, we weren't able to get there, and we haven't been able to produce a vision for it yet. But collective bargaining is pretty delicate. We said that in here. It requires discretion. It's really hard to collective bargain when people are constantly spreading misinformation and kind of soiling that relationship. But our actions during the process, we're always going to have the community's best interest in mind, both fiscally and service-wise. But there had to be some kind of a crossing of the two. So the budget proposed on that day made the following assumptions. You see them on here. We were gonna run status quo at least, even though the budget was changed. All stations were remain open. They have collective bargaining changes. We were going to try to get them implemented by September 30th. We did not do that. New model by October 1st. We did not get there with full completion by December 31st. We wanted to have a reorganized department running by January 1st. Obviously, we did not get there. And that any staffing reductions that had to take place, they'd be done through attrition. That has happened. If it's not possible through attrition, we said that we would try to get employees employed in other departments within the city. Again, that has not had to happen yet. But if the bargaining process we said was ineffective, then all of those bullets would have to be revisited, every single one of them. So what are we doing for 2018? We've again asked to begin that collective bargaining process with the goal of reducing personnel costs between that $3 million and $3.25 million range. We have to get it down there. If we're unable to accomplish it, we're going to work toward a collaborative solution with one of our neighbors. We think that that's something that will strengthen fire service for multiple communities and it will keep personnel costs at a reasonable level. In the meantime, we're going to continue staffing 9. We intend to backfill with overtime only as needed. We intend to work with our neighboring jurisdictions and our command staff to ensure that mutual aid calls are not burdensome on either party. We do not intend to hire any new employees at this time, and we do not intend to immediately reduce staffing any further. That doesn't mean that when people retire that we're going to backfill those positions, but it means that we're not going to take action to do the reduction. That's the end of what I have. I'll take questions from the commissioners if you want.
Commissioner Muskegon?
So I understand the collective bargaining agreement ends on December 31st, 2018.
Correct.
So currently...
Could you speak up, please? It's really hard to hear you back here, and we would all like to hear what you have to say.
Okay. So my question is that the collective bargaining agreement that we're currently operating under expires December 31, 2018.
Correct.
And so at this point, it sounds like we have a status quo of sorts that we've been operating under for, let's say, the last quarter of 2017. And that's the plan is to continue that and to engage in collective bargaining for what's going to happen next.
Correct. Yes. We've already made an initial reach out. We were told to kind of have our attorney contact their attorney. So I don't know that contact attorney to attorney has happened yet, but we did reach out and, to try to open the discussion as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've discussed this many times. It seems like that's kind of the key to the situation. We've kind of just seemed to have fought to a stalemate on the trying to do anything to make any changes, and we're just waiting for that process to occur. So, I mean, I hear that there's input to do something, but I think if we would raise the staffing levels from the 9 and 6, or those are what we're staffing for and what we sometimes fall to. I mean, we won't. It'll be a tough budget situation, and we have to look forward to the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the current idea, is to start the collective bargaining process, and obviously all these issues would be dealt with.
Correct. If they can be dealt with. So the goal is that we can mutually agree on the changes that need to be made and make them soon. I guess even if implementation is until January 1st of 2019, but have agreement in place to get where we know that we're going to be able to staff it sustainably and manage it sustainably. Yeah, so that's the goal. Whether we get there, tomorrow or 6 months from now or never, I don't know.
Commissioner German?
Oh, I just want to know how many firefighters do we have total?
28
And-
right now, 27 and a fire marshal,
And how many fire stations?
3.
3. Okay. And you said right now with the collective bargaining is to try to start and negotiate in the middle of the contract now, or
It's really focused on the renewal, on the renewal period. We tried to negotiate mid-contract to get some relief and maximize staffing. We were essentially told that they're not going to open the contract, so that left us with really only one choice, and that was to manage staffing by not approving overtime. That was really the only tool that we had at that point.
okay. So kind of both sides are kind of basically exercising their rights. Firefighters have a contract that expires at the end of the year, where the city is looking to maintain a budget and try to cut costs. Okay.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah. I keep on hearing the word sustainable, to a sustainable level on multiple regards, but it's not really been explained what that looks like. What does sustainable look like? I mean, you can talk about our overall budget and say, if we were to maintain the status quo, the cost is going to rise to this, and that's going to leave us with an overall general budget that's running a deficit. But it's not clear to me exactly what sustainable means. And also, one concern I guess I have throughout is that what's driving how to staff? Is it the bottom dollar, or is it data and public safety? I mean, for me, you need to start first and foremost public safety in mind. And I'm not saying you aren't otherwise, but I'm just saying for me, when you're looking at this, how do we staff our fire department? You start with public safety being paramount and using data and analyses to inform that so that we can make informed decisions about, okay, all the supporting evidence. Let's use the NFFPA, for example, the National Fire Fighters Protection Association. Indicates that you should have 15 when responding to a house fire, a structural fire, and that you should have at least 4 per company, 4 per truck, 4 per engine. And when we drop down to 6, we're looking at 2 per company. So what are we using to justify that 2 sufficient? I know that we've heard, well, status quo may not meet the minimums recommended by the static staffing may not meet the minimums necessary or proposed or recommended by the NFPA, but that when we have an emergency, we have these mechanisms to ramp up to get to the recommended levels of 15 responding to a structure. But right now, that's when you're down to 6, you've got to ramp up 9 more to get to 15, and we're having to rely on all calls and mutual aid increasingly to get to that 15. And that doesn't seem sustainable to me. Like, I want to know what were near-term plans. Let's assume the best case scenario here, that collective bargaining goes forward in good faith on all sides. Some of the shenanigans stops, and some of the casting of blame and aspersion stops, and we sit around the negotiating table in earnest and sincerity and work on this and say that we are able to renew the contract and bring it to a level that provides adequate public safety and that also brings it into what you say is a fiscally sustainable position. What's the near-term plan then? How are we going to make sure that we have adequate staffing? Because right now what's going on in terms of just relying on all-call and mutual aid is not sustainable for this year in terms of providing adequate public safety for our community, for our citizens and our property owners. So I'd like to know what the plan is to address that. I mean, I've suggested before, and we've talked about it before, of possibly doing partial public safety, and I know that it requires bargaining on each side, but maybe at least we seek voluntary police officers to voluntarily cross-train for firefighting, so that we do have more flexibility in staffing and we're not forced to do overtime, that we can have a couple police officers on each shift. Maybe we need to change the shift from 24 hours to 12 hours so that we have alignments in shifts, and we can also better handle some of that overtime issues. Go back to part-time, but handle it differently. I understand we did part-time several years ago, but the way it was implemented, there wasn't a whole lot of cost benefit for us, and then it didn't really work out with the firefighters themselves. So maybe we revisit part-time in a different manner that just works better. You re-examine how it was implemented before, and instead of contracting out with the temp agency to provide those part-timers, that we have a part-time program, and maybe even help bring people from within our community on that part-time, because that's one of the other issues with all calls, is that a lot of our firefighters don't happen to live in close proximity to our city, so it's difficult for them to respond to all calls, and we don't get the response we'd like in our all calls. But maybe we look at how do we incentivize or encourage people in our community, in our high schools, to go into firefighting and start at least on our part-time, and so that we can then have our fire department be more reflective of our community. We talk about that with our police department. We want to do that with our fire department. But I feel like I'm droning on a little bit right now, so I'll stop. But I would like to know.
No.
I would like to know, what is the near-term plan as well as the long-term plan. Personally, I don't feel comfortable relying on what we have right now, which is just saying, well, if we drop to 6, we drop to 6. Our only mechanisms is all calls and mutual aid. And if that's the case, I would welcome what data and analyses you're using to support that, aside from just saying, well, we can lean on all calls and we can lean on mutual aid.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is we can on those two things to some extent, right? Because we don't want to overburden those, and I won't pretend to be a technical expert in terms of firefighting. But reality is, like, the short term, we can authorize more overtime. We can amend the budget and allow for more overtime as long as we recognize that there's an end in sight. The problem is, like I said, we were able to show from the graphs that more overtime doesn't necessarily mean more people here. Because we were able to show when we had 11 on, we were having, you could have 6 people missing, and some of those there were 6 and 5 or 7 missing from a shift. So that's the hard part, is I don't think even adding folks on, which if you remember when we went through this back in 2014, we were going to raise shifts from 9 to 10 and then to 11, and hopefully we expected to go up to 12, and we expected that doing that was going to end this problem. But we can show you that the data that the more people we added, the more benefit time was used, and there wasn't really an answer to it. The only real answer to it is to get more control over how many people can be gone on a day. And right now, we don't have a mechanism to get control of that right now. We deal with that in the police department. They're missing some folks right now, but we don't see a room full like this because Jeff's able to manage that group and say, okay, during Rebel Road or during this time or during that time, there's no people off, or there's only one person off, and there's not all these standards. Whereas with this group, everything's governed by a contract, right? Every single aspect of it is got to be written in there in terms of how many can be off for this or that, or what we can do for this, and what the mechanism is for that. But in the patrol contract, it's not in there. There's nothing in there that says one person has to be guaranteed off on this day, or 5 or 3 or anything. But they all get their time off. It works just fine. Everybody gets the time off they need, but it's not abused. It's not. You don't see that stacking. You never see really in the police department overtime being used just to meet some kind of minimum staffing, whether we set it or arbitrarily or with data. There's never overtime used to meet that staffing level. Overtime is mostly there when we're trying to do something, when we're responding to a shooting, when we're dealing with a drug issue in a neighborhood, when we're dealing with something in an area. That drives the overtime. So we know that when we spend it, we're getting something tangible, back to the community, something out of it, additional work or something special. But in this one, we see, thousands and thousands of hours, even with 11 people there, thousands and thousands of hours just to keep it at 9. I think that we'll be chasing ourselves if we don't, and that's been the hard part, is because we want safety to be the top of the priority. But if we say, hey, safety is top priority, and we're not going to worry about managing this, as long as there's 9 people here, we'll take care of it. You're going to see those graphs, shoot right back up, like, almost the very next day, unless there's some language in there that says, okay, we're willing to move up to a 9-person minimum or 8-person minimum, but only if we can temporarily get these, get the time off limited to 1 or 2 per day, or 1 per day, or something along those lines. Because we want staffing up there too, but there's no guarantee if I add 1 more person to every shift that any more days will be at 6 or 7 or 8. There's no guarantee that that'll happen, because we can show you in October we were at 6 when we still had 10 and 11 on a shift. It was still happening. So I think the reality is we need people need the decision making in terms of when you take a day off. At least you need to consider that if that's really paramount from a firefighter's perspective. Hey, 6 is not adequate, or 6 is not safe. What should I do when I'm thinking of taking a day off and I put it down to 6? Should I consider picking a different day to take off? Should I consider not taking Saturday off but taking off Tuesday, and not taking off, Friday but taking off Wednesday? But just make those decisions, because we see it every time. I mean, I don't want to drag all the other departments into it, but I don't have a contract that says all my clerk people need to be here on election day, but where they are on election day? They're here. There's nothing that stops them from taking a vacation day on that day. There's nothing that stops them from calling in sick. But they don't use it on that day, because they know that we need them here on that particular day, and I would hope that they never would. Even up in my office where there's just 2 people, we coordinate that just well. If Barb's going to be gone, I try to make sure I'm there. If I'm going to be gone, Barb tries to make sure she's there, and we work it out. Even if we both kind of wanted to have the same day off, and every once in a while that happens, and we make a plan, we put somebody in charge, and we lock the door, and we leave a note on there, but that's the exception, not the everyday occurrence. And that's the problem is unless we get a change in the way that benefit time can be used, I can keep adding folks, but it's not going to guarantee that you're going to get to 7. It's just not going to get you to 7 or 8. The only way to really do that right now is to rely on those 2 emergency growth systems that we have, which are they all call, and maybe it's paid on call, or maybe it's part-time folks like you said, or maybe it's more mutual aid or more auto aid from other communities that are willing and able to help us out. But from our standpoint, we didn't think we could give carte blanche, and I think it's damaging to our ability to manage it if all of a sudden it's carte blanche and hey, the new, if you tell us, hey, the new staffing is 7, and then we go, I'll absolutely implement it if you tell me the new staffing is 7. But we will see a spike in that, because we've seen it over and over and over again for years. And it's not to say that every single person is doing it. Some of these could be very coincidental, some could be emergencies, but there's too much of it for it all to be coincidental. It's just too much. It's day in, day out, every single day of the month. And I'll gladly spread out all the roll calls here, and you can randomly pick 2 or 3 of them, and take a look at them, or randomly pick 8 or 10 of them and take a look at them. But they very much look the same. And I think they'll look the same even if we say let's hire 3 more. They'll look just like they did last week.
No, I absolutely agree with you in regard to needing to get overtime costs under control, and the need for us to have better flexibility in terms of staffing, and hopefully we can sort that out with this contract renewal. Even if that were to happen, it may not go into effect till the end of the year. So what are we to do in the meantime? And that's where I'm not saying it's hard minimum 7. You have to have overtime every single case, but what other things can we do to help address that issue and not just rely on overtime? Because our budget usually, a lot of times when you look at the recent years, the fire department budget ends up being higher than what we forecast, and a large part of that was due to overtime, excessive overtime, going into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So no, it's not necessarily fair to our taxpayers and our citizens that our inability to manage staffing well enough is prompting them to have to fork over hundreds of thousands of their money. I mean, these are taxpayers' dollars. They're not ours. Forcing them to pay all that overtime. So, that's one thing that obviously needs to be negotiated in the contract for renewal. But I would like to know. And auto aid is another option. I don't think we should be relying on mutual aid. If you've got auto aid to come in reliably to get us ramping up that staffing levels to respond to fires, then so be it. That's one piece of it. What I'm concerned about is that we are status quo like this for the rest of the year. And then, like, so what's your view in terms of how talks progress? You know, when we start bargaining, you know, are you going to work towards the last minute in December of this year, or, you know, mid-year, you're going to be like, you know, it's not going where I'd like it to go. I'm just going to stop negotiating and I'm going to look at alternatives.
Yeah, I think that the reality is we'll have to be pretty darn close on agreement, you know, within the next 4 weeks. I mean, because if we're going to look at another option, then we need many, many months to implement it. And so the reality is, if people come to the table understanding and sympathetic and recognizing what the issues are, we should be able to get to it. We shouldn't need, you know, 30 bargaining sessions to do this. If people want to get to an end, and bargaining team on the firefighter side knows that getting to an end raises staffing immediately, then they should be trying to get to an end, you know, immediately. And from our standpoint, if raising staffing to you know, sustainable level, I even don't like that word, but I brought this up here to show you what I was considering sustainable. I'd love to be staffed at just like it was, you know, just like it was before we started this conversation with 11 or potentially with 12. But there's one way we can do it, and I mean, it's a simple math equation, right? If we want 12 and they cost $130,000 a piece, we need X. If we want 12 and they cost $100,000 a piece, we need Y. And I think that, you know, if the goal really is to get 12 and have 12 here as much as possible, because that was at least our original goal when we started down this path of hiring new people 2 years ago, then I think we have a clear path to it. We can say, okay, 12 people, and we have X number of dollars to work with. Here's a math equation. You know, this is what we got to get the number down to. So how do we get there? What is the low-hanging fruit? What's the difficult decisions? And it should be relatively, you know, easy to come to that, to at least come to the conclusion of what it looks like to get to 12 within a budget, and know whether or not we can actually agree upon it. And once we know what 12 looks like in a budget, and know whether or not we can agree upon it, then we can move forward. We can either move forward with a plan to work with these individuals, or we can try to look for a plan that's in a different direction. But the reality is, that takes a significant amount of time to implement. So you can't wait till, say, you know, October 31st and then expect to implement it in January, for example. So, you know, we're going to have hard, fast deadlines and say we need to know if we're going to come to an agreement quickly.
For moving in that
There's
direction.
no dragging it on, no trying to make it last, you know, just come to a philosophical understanding on where we need to be, and then agree whether or not we can get there. And if we can't get there, then I think it's you know, our options are pretty limited. We have a public safety option, we have a combined department option, and those are pretty much the two options we have.
Commissioner Warren?
It is very disappointing to be a part of this meeting, mainly because it's pretty much feels like the exact same meeting that we had in June. A lot of the same facts, a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same ideas for solutions, and so many parties that have been involved said, we're going to fix this. We're going to work together. We're going to fix this, right? I mean, that's what I heard. And I walked away from that meeting very optimistic, because I don't want anybody involved feeling taken advantage of, or feeling unsafe, right? So that was many months ago. And I don't hear any real changes. So I want to be optimistic about moving forward, and I want to problem solve and work together, but I don't know how that's going to look, because this feels so familiar. This is the same. You know, I'm looking up at my meeting notes from the meetings in the summer, and all these different comments, and it really seemed like we were going to work towards that solution. And I don't know. It seems very confusing to me, some of the things that are getting in the way of that. I'm not a firefighter. I'm not at the collective bargaining meetings. We had talked about maybe there should be more people there, and what's the integrity of keeping that collective bargaining, right? We had gone back and forth. It's obviously very complex. And I don't know how many people in the audience or sitting up here with me feel the same way, but I mean, it's very, very disappointing, and in some ways baffling that we're still having this conversation. I want to work towards that solution of people being treated fairly, people feeling safe in their homes, people feeling safe at work. I mean, these are basic things. And so I'm ready to move forward, whatever solution may be, but it's disheartening, it's disappointing. I'm not hearing any new solutions. I'm not. So that's concerning, and I'm hopeful for them. Maybe they exist, but we need safety. We know that, and safety for everybody involved is. I don't know how to get there.
That's a key point. I mean, safety for everyone involved. It's not just about our residents and the people that happen to visit our city, but it's also about our firefighting personnel and make sure that they're operating in a safe environment and have the support so they're not prone to injury because of understaffing. And that's why I get concerned when we drop down to 2 per engine, responding to fires, and then having to wait for others to arrive before they can actually tackle the fire. Or maybe they feel compelled to not wait because they see an emergency and they respond to it prematurely and get injured in the process. There's a host of factors, and even the 24-hour shift. I think it was a firefighter tagged me on a story about firefighters being overworked, underslept, not getting enough sleep, and possibly they're more prone to just various different types of diseases. And so it got me thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't be on a 24-hour shift where suddenly you have to wake up from sleep and respond to a fire, and your sleep cycle is disrupted, and then makes you more prone to various different diseases. So perhaps part of that is looking at a 12-hour shift to then align with the police force as well, so that we can tap some of our police officers to step in with need be. I've heard from firefighters over the years that 15 is what the National Fire Protection Association recommends in responding to a structural fire, that 12 was adequate because they realized it was realistic that 15 probably was not something that our city could afford, or most cities can afford, is to have a static 15 on duty at all times, that it could drop down to 12 as a static and then potentially drop further and use all call or other things. So personally, I guess what I'm saying here is that I personally would like to see us at 12. Get back to where we were originally with 12. Have that hard minimum of 9, but as such, the union gives up its 3 mandatory benefit leave days. We need to have that flexibility if we're going to go for that 12 and have that hard minimum of 9. We need to have that staffing flexibility, and so I would encourage the union to consider making changes in that regard and work with us on getting to that adequate safety level. And then when we're at 3 per engine, when you need that 4th to come in, it could be all call, it could be mutual aid, it could be auto aid, it could be a police officer that's trained to respond to fires. But I would like to personally, based upon the data analysis I've read and seen with NFPA, with NIST, and other institutions, I feel comfortable at 12 and 3 per engine. But with the knowing that we can ramp up slightly, not necessarily have to double it quickly, but slightly in order to respond adequately to a fire. Plus, it has that unit cohesiveness, company cohesiveness, rather than having to rely on surrounding firefighters. You've got your own personnel, men and women working together and building that cohesiveness. So that's just where I stand. I would like negotiations to proceed in earnest and quickly, and make sure that we're getting on the same page and we're working together to preserve our fire department. And if it's not looking like it's going in that direction, I would like to be notified as soon as possible from management that they want to seek alternatives and would like to abandon collective bargaining. And if we go that route, then I would like to open that up to the public as to what our options will be, so the public has some consultation, so the public has some buy-in on how we're ultimately going to provide public safety to them. This is not something that could be done in a vacuum. Something as important as public safety. So if we're going to start looking at alternatives, then we need to be conferring with our citizens on what they find to be acceptable or unacceptable and how we proceed. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Commissioner Muskegon?
Yeah, I think that it's obviously an important consideration is what is public safety, and I think that number is somewhere out there, and it's like anything, you gotta find a way to it, and I think other communities are doing that. We gotta look at their examples and see what the situation is in the greater Muskegon area and look at that. A couple of notes. I mean, I think I think with Commissioner Warren's point that we're frustrated, I mean, I think that it was made kind of clear that we were intending to open the contract and that the only way to see some of these savings that we put into the budget was through those things. And it's my understanding that that was not agreed to by the union. So I don't know what other steps we could take, to make some of those positive changes and incorporate ideas. I mean, it seems like it's only come from one side that we're not going to discuss the issues that are going to somehow impact these numbers. So I just want to point that out. And then I think we do need to have some discussion about what is safe and what is not. And like I said, I gave some points about that. But I think, we either we solve our issues for safety outside of the contract, or we open the whole thing and get it over at once. I don't think we can just say, well, we're going to work with the union to try and fix this issue to get up to 6. I mean, or from 6 to something else. At this point, we can't. It's not that simple. We can't just precision try to amend the contract to fix our problem for 9 months. It just doesn't seem feasible, and clearly we just need to focus on what the big issue is January 1, 2019. So I guess that those are just some of my observations, and I think that I don't know how we have the discussion, in a fair and open and rational way to see these different sides and get to some sort of understanding about what's a short-term way to go forward and what's a long-term way. But I really don't think we can just. I mean, I'm hesitant to just raise the numbers because we've seen what happens with benefit time when we just raise the numbers, and I don't feel that it's right to the citizens to say we and I'm not just about the money, but I mean, I think we had a budget. We're going over the budget now, and we're okay with that. I don't think we're going to fire Frank over that. So we're trying to get to some middle ground, but we have to keep on both sides. Otherwise, it's very difficult to see where it's going to go.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I understand firemen's side in terms of they have a contract. And if you have a contract and you have things in your contract that are good for you, you don't want to give them up. But as a city, we can't go on with, and I'm not even going to say fire department is taking advantage of their contract rights, what's in their contract. But it's not working. It's not working for the city. And we got to come to some kind of agreement. I mean, I agree. We all thought that this was going to get worked out. And I'm not putting the blame on the city. I'm not putting the blame on the fire department. It didn't work out. And I can kind of understand where we just butting heads because who wants to give up what they earn? I say what they have fought for throughout the years in your contract. But at the same time, I think there's individuals maybe that knows how to take advantage of what they have gotten, what they have bargained for over the years in their contract. And so it brings us to here. at a stalemate so far. But we can't keep going like this. So I don't have the answers. And I just wish that this could have came to a better conclusion than maybe where it's going.
Thank you.
I think there were some other alternatives, and they were discussed, in the bargaining sessions that the commission had. And I didn't think we thought those were palatable. So that's, that's put us in this position we are now in January. So, we agreed to go. We didn't want to do anything with the contract. We agreed to honor the contract, but we got to manage the contract, and we're between a rock and a hard place.
Commissioner Johnson.
Just one final note. Well, I hope we can move forward and work together and actually finally come to a conclusion that works for everyone, equitable. I would just say that long term, and this may be multiple years, I just want to reiterate where I stand on providing fire service and protection to our community. And when this was brought up at our goal setting session in 2016, I supported a regional fire authority that could include or encompass our neighbors, whether that's Heights, whether that's Muskegon Township, whether it's Northern Shores, North Muskegon, whomever, collaborating within a fire authority so that we can provide good fire protection service to greater Muskegon area as efficiently as possible. Getting rid of overhead, getting rid of admin, and focusing the resources, the limited resources of all of our communities in this area, on doing an effective job in public safety. And so I still hold that feeling and would like to see Muskegon and our neighboring municipalities ultimately enter into some kind of fire authority. It didn't seem like, from what I heard, that now is the appropriate time for that. Well, at least last year wasn't. Maybe things have changed this year. That we can start working towards that. I don't think we can necessarily get a regional fire authority off the ground by the end of the year, but at least if we can have that in the back of mind, that I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that, but I personally would like us to see a regional fire authority long term, whether that's a few years from now or that's a decade from now. I really think that's what we need to do. We owe it to our citizens, I think, and utilizing limited resources as efficiently as possible. And I think that's one area that we can do it, is a regional fire authority.
Commissioner Warren.
I wonder, in the meantime, and not that it would have anything, it wouldn't be legally binding, or it wouldn't be, I don't know all the rules through the union, but it would be, I would be curious to know if there is a commitment, if there is a pledge from firefighters to avoid or try to work against this whole stacking of benefit time, because that's obviously one of the big issues that keeps being shown to us. And I fully want to believe that emergencies happen. Of course they do. People get sick. Things come up. But I agree, it seems like, do things come up that often? I mean, I have a job, and I don't ever get to use any sort of hours of overtime like that, and I get that that's not in my contract, and I fully understand all of that, but I would be really curious when it comes to our firefighters, what that personal commitment and what that personal pledge is, and would that help to alleviate some of the feelings of being taken advantage of from a taxpayer standpoint, and maybe have more faith in safety across the board. What do those personal pledges and commitments look like, whether it's trading time or trying to avoid some of that stacking situation? It's not going to fix everything, but it may be something to explore in the meantime as we try to work together.
Thank you. Commissioner German.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here. I'm not even in the bargaining room, and I'm frustrated. And I can pretty much understand how firefighters feel, how Frank feel. being part of a union over the years myself, I know, I have some idea how bargaining goes. And yes, we are in a contract with the firefighters, and they have every right to exercise their rights, just like the city has every right to manage accordingly. But the bigger picture is, we have a city to maintain, you guys have a job, and we have to work collectively. And until we do that, and you decide to do that, and I really think that, you know, everybody just needs to just take a deep breath, take one step back, and try to regain trust and say, hey, we're going to come to the negotiation table. This is what we're going to do. Have a plan. I have not heard a plan from, you know, from the firefighters, because I'm not in those sessions, so I don't know what you guys' plans are. The data up here is data driven. We do know there's a problem with overtime and a budget issue. So I think until we decide to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to sit down, have fair talks, build some type of trust. This is what we want. And if you choose not to do that, then, you know, maybe the city may have to just honor that contract. But I think the sooner the better. If you wait too long, then it's going to get ugly. And that's, you know, what's happening out there on social media, the distrust. And I can say publicly, you know, Muskegon firefighters have provided some of the best service around. I know that for a fact. You know, I've lived here all my life. And some of the firefighters that have served and are serving now, they're active in the communities. I said, but me as a commissioner and, you know, with the governing body here, we also have a job to do. So we need to work together, I think, build some trust, and sit down and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. But until we do that, then we're going to be at a stalemate, and this is what's going on. We're not getting anywhere.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just had a question.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, what determines, you know, when someone's on elective leave day, on their personal day, and on vacation day, and we get a situation that merits overtime, or merits bringing someone off duty into work, what determines that that's overtime? Is that state law? Is that in the contract?
It's in the contract.
It's in the contract. So there's the possibility that we could, if the contract were changed, that when we're bringing you off duty to fill in, backfill for someone that's on sick leave or whatever else, that it could just be straight time. They end up getting double time because they're getting vacation pay, but they're filling in this other spot and it's just straight time. I mean, that's a possibility, and that would help alleviate some of the cost overruns. I mean, would it not? Is that still untenable?
Yeah. You know, I don't know legally, you know, if we could do that or not. I mean, if somebody's due overtime, I don't think they could really give that, you know, give that up. But yeah, if somebody was coming into work and it was at a regular time versus time and a half, yeah, it would save us, you know, 33% or whatever. So yeah, there would be a savings. We'd get those hours a little bit cheaper, you know, so to speak.
Well, if it's correct me if I'm wrong, leave counsel. So, if as long as the contract allows it, and they don't happen to exceed 56 hours in that scheduled period, it would not be automatic overtime.
Right.
So the scheduled period is 9 days.
Federal law requires overtime be paid for actual hours worked over 53.
Over 53.
Actual hours worked. Contract calls for overtime, where you also include the ELD days, the vacation, the sick time, etc. Towards that 53.
That's the trigger.
That's the
Okay,
trigger.
that's the key thing, is those elective day and benefit leave hours are being included
Correct.
in that calculus, and that's due to the contract, or
Yes, contract.
okay, so that could be altered to help alleviate overtime costs.
Conceivably, yeah.
Okay.
Conceptually.
I'm just trying to find potential solutions, and that's why, I mean, I'm throwing out different ideas
That's
and
open
reiterating
the contract.
because,
And
yeah, I
how
mean,
did they do that?
well, that's all part of the bargain, the renewal. We're renewing the contract. That's what phase we're in right now, is we're doing collective bargaining to renew the contract. And so things that we want, things that we feel are absolutely necessary to get us to the point that allows us to provide the service that we need for our community and at the cost that's acceptable, that's what we're trying to get at. And I'm just, rather than just griping and moaning, I want to try to present some possible ideas and probe so that we can present some possible solutions. And I want to do it here so they can hear it, you can hear it, and maybe something, I don't know,
Same ideas.
like clicks.
I think those are, I mean, I think that that's obvious. I mean, obviously, that's what Frank has said for 8-9 months. That's what we want to negotiate.
The problem's obvious. The solution, that's not been presented as a solution. We just keep on hearing the problem over and over.
The first thing we need to do is to go to a negotiating table. The first thing we need to do.
What about solutions?
That you only can. I think that I'm sure. I'm confident that Frank has a plenty of solutions, and I think we've asked the union to come with their solutions too. That was my understanding of the whole beginning of this fiscal year was come with your solutions. So we've been open to do that. I mean, I don't think we need to publicly try to in this time, come up with solutions. The people who are supposed to do that and have been told to be prepared to do that just need to have the meeting.
Sure. And it doesn't hurt that I throw out some solutions either.
It doesn't.
Thank you.
But the key is to hold the meeting. And I think another key is that, I don't think we're going to solve it for a short-term fix. We're only going to have one discussion. There's no, look at the federal government. I mean, that's a nightmare. That's what happens when you do short-term solutions to a long-term problem. So we are going to do this once, and I think that's it. I don't think that we have, the political capital or even the time or anything to do anything more than focus on, all right, we need to look at January 1, 2019, and that's how I feel. If we feel like there's problems with public safety outside of that, we need to deal with that in a different outside manner somehow. I mean, with something that we are allowed to do. But I don't think we're going to get any. We should not be suggesting that we're going to try to pose solutions to the problem that starts on February 1st, by making some change to the contract. I think we gotta, we're gonna live with the contract till December 31, and if we have other solutions that the city can come up with on their own, we gotta just implement those, and that's I guess, the commission's decision.
I hope we live with the contract through the end of the
Mr.
year.
Warren?
Yeah, just to speak to that, I mean, I think there's been a lot of solutions proposed. The solution that hasn't happened is agreement from both parties about a solution. I mean, there's been a lot of ideas, there's been a lot of closed session talk, there's been a lot of emailing back and forth, right? I mean, a lot of that has happened, we just haven't been able to reach a solution that both parties are happy with. And so that's where I think, as you're mentioning, that needs to try again is I guess what we're shooting for. But the solutions, in my opinion, there are a lot of possible solutions. It's the agreement that we're missing.
Commissioner Turnquist?
There are a lot of problems, and I'm sure that the firefighters look at us and say, we're asking you to give to us. What are you going to give to us? And as I look at the problem, I've never worked in that situation, but for the supervision of the fire department to be unable to ever know who's going to be showing up for work tomorrow, that's just an impossible thing. Days off and things should be supervised and controlled and have some kind of idea when they're going to occur. Not the night before and a bunch of them don't show and we're down to staffing of 6. Ken mentioned earlier, I think in a city like ours, our city has grown. We have new businesses coming here, new developments. I don't see how we can keep doing with less to provide public safety. Public safety, education is very, very important to the success of any city. But for the supervision of the fire department, never to know who's going to come to work. You just can't run a business that way. And I guess, in a way, we're asking you to give some of that control back to us so we don't have people coming in on their day off and getting double time to work overtime and that type of thing. It just ties it, just spends money, non-productive money. So I don't know what the solution is, but if I were a supervisor in the fire department, I'd be frustrated.
Any other comments or
Did we lose-
questions?
We lost our chair and vice chair.
Yeah.
Way to step in, Dan.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? I think we were just basically responding to the staffing update provided by the city manager.
Yeah, he only asked for questions, so I don't think he was expecting all the comments he got.
So if we have no more, I think that we are entering the public comment period of the city commission meeting. I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. The mayor usually is very good at getting us started off correctly with all the rules of public comment, but I'll do my best. So it is the public participation point of the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment, there's a form that you can turn into the city clerk. We have received a number of people who would like to address the commission. If you are going to address the commission, if you're representing an individual, it's there's a 3-minute time limit on the comment, and if you're representing an organization, there's a 10-minute time limit. Also, we ask that you address the comments to the mayor, and that we may not respond directly to the inquiries or the questions that citizens may have, and that we may refer those matters to staff to respond. So the mayor's back here, so I'm going to let him start with the comments that have been submitted.
You're doing just fine. So thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Again, I'd like to reiterate, for any individuals, when we aren't in a position to be able to answer specific concern or answer, please stay behind for further contact with myself, and we can put you in contact with the appropriate staff for further personal contact, either with the staff or me. Regarding the topic of the fire department, we'll be assessing the manager's presentation as well as any of your comments tonight and compiling those. Those will be discussed further by the commission and staff in the very, very, very near future. In addition, the city manager did touch on the fact that he did reach out to union representation today with a suggestion or instruction to have our council contact their council, so we are still in the realm of collective bargaining. So, at this time then, Alan C. Lowe. So I just need your name, your address, your passport from Roosevelt Park, Mr. Mayor.
I do have a passport. I'm Alan C. Lowe. I'm a business owner. I own Muskegon Transfer at 1922 Park Street. It's Muskegon's oldest trucking company. Thank you. I had a discussion. We call it the hot tub of conversation at the Y. And I was kind of designated to come down and talk to you tonight about fire protection. I sit with a lot of business owners. We once in a while have lunch. We also have insurance people. We were talking about ISO ratings. Years ago, Muskegon had a very good ISO rating, and I'm going back by book. I believe it's 5 years ago was the last time Muskegon was rated. They had a rating of 4, which is not bad. That's, 4 is on the way up to 1. I thought that was really good. So I asked some people from the insurance, how does this affect my business if the rating drops due to manpower? And they said, well, the insurance companies, which is run by an organization called ISO, the insurance, thank you, service office, thank you, and they determine rates for insurance companies. Well, if your staffing levels go down and they do a review of you at the time and find out your staffing's insufficient, your rates will go up. Well, the rates are passed on to businesses such as mine, and then we pay higher insurance fees, which I never thought was right, but this is how it goes. It's, I guess it's just part of life. You know, you're due for a reassessment, and I looked that up, and I believe that's in 1 or 2 years from now. 1 year? Okay. Thank you. This year? Okay. Well, thank you. I stand corrected. But, you know, I look at ways of lowering my costs in business because I have to pass them on just like everybody else. And, you know, I've had our business in Muskegon. It's been here. Okay, thank you, Ann. We've been here. We want to stay here. You know, I think Muskegon's a great place. They got a lot going for them. You know, relying on mutual aid from other fire departments or other police departments doesn't always work. I've looked at some scheduling and some overruns from other communities. I was in a situation some years ago down in Battle Creek where a house was on fire, and I stopped and reported, and they asked me where I was. And I said, well, I'm on Capital A Avenue. What side of the road are you on? I said, what difference does that make? Well, Battle Creek goes to one side and Springfield goes to the other side. And I said, it's on the north side of the road. Okay, well, fire truck came, police car came finally. Meanwhile, the house was on fire for 5 minutes because nobody, this is one thing I'd like to avoid would be jurisdictional crossover where nobody wants to help anybody anymore. I know our firefighters and our police like to mutually help each other, and I hope they continue that. Now, I want to see the firefighters' levels maintained here because now that you have a new convention center going in and a new lakefront development, I think that's great. And in closing, I'd just like to say, you know, your fire departments and your police departments reflect what your community is. When kids or parents see a fire truck running down the road with a police car after them, they know it's been handled. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. William J. Blakeman.
Have all the fire
He's about pigeon now.
had a chance to speak?
Okay. Greg Borgman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Peterson. I reside at 228 Houston Avenue. I know this is difficult for everybody. I think we live in a community that really values our public service. I don't think we're alone in that, our public safety. This one really values our public safety, police, and fire. And I think what's disconcerting for most of us as citizens, as I speak for a group, we just don't know what the plan is. We hear about the plan, but we don't know what it is. And then we hear about mutual aid. Well, that's not a plan because that's something that's a given and it's already in place. I learned something from a former superintendent of schools, John Felsky, most of you know him. When he was hit with a $5 million budget cut from the governor, he had some big decisions to make, and I remember him putting together, because Bill Wright and I went to all of those meetings, he had 4 or 5 different plans that were put together, and then he had that discussion with citizens, teachers, and various staff, and that moved along rather quickly, and it ended up being as positive as it could be. I would like to see the community or the citizens be better communicated in this. because there are a lot of angry citizens because they feel they've been left in the dark. I've spoken with Deborah Warren quite a bit. I've spoken with Ken Johnson. My thoughts resonate with theirs, along with the vice mayor. I mean, we have to make this work, but you need to collaborate with the citizens. That's got to happen. And if you could come up with some sort of a format for that, I don't think we would have been in this bind. That was my experience with the schools. But we need these firefighters. They were the first ones there to pick up my 97-year-old father who collapsed in a stroke, and they knew him by name. So they're people, they're not widgets. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg. Ms. Deborah Drake.
Hello. I'm Deborah Drake, and I reside at 1309 Randolph. I had a whole document that I wanted to talk about tonight. However, in listening to Mr. Peterson talk, actually to correct him, there are 26 firefighters. Also, I listened to Mr. Peterson talk about he must accommodate vacations. Well, of course, I'm sure that you all get vacations. You'd like to take your vacations. I understand there were firefighters this year that went to go on mission trips. Their vacation was canceled. There are a lot of things behind the scenes that the public does not know of the treatment that the firefighters are going through with this administration. I would love to see turnover rates. I'd love to see an employee satisfaction rates. I would love to see turnover rates since this administration came about and before, to see where we're at. Employees, I've been in HR for 24 years now in West Michigan, and employees love communication. They want to be respected, they want to be heard, encouraged, and empowered. And this is not happening in the city of Muskegon. I see your data up here, but I would love to see the details. There's a female firefighter and many men firefighters that work hard every day. They wear equipment. They are up 13 times sometimes during the night. I saw some chuckles when Mr. Johnson discussed a sleep pattern, and that was very disrespectful because they work really hard and they're up all during the night. And, there's a lot of things that happen to your body when you're a firefighter. The equipment you wear and how heavy it is. They are required to work out. They work out. However, they deal with patients that are sick. They deal with a lot of things, carrying people that take toll on your body. So, of course, they are going to call in because they have to have hip surgeries. They have to have knee surgeries. Or they get sick and just a common cold, like you can go to work, your kids can go to school with a cold. They cannot wear their equipment. So yes, they are going to call in. So all this needs to be taken into consideration. And I've seen a lot of social media going back both ways. And to hear Mr. Peterson call his employees and discuss salaries and call some people cheaper employees. The cheaper ones left. Yes, they did, because they're tired of the treatment of the city and how they're being treated. And yes, they did leave. People are retiring because of the treatment of the city and how you all are treating them. That's why they're leaving. And now we are down to sometimes 6 people because yes, they have injuries and sometimes they do get sick, but that's because of their job. They are not abusing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ken Shetty.
Okay. Greetings.
Good evening.
As a taxpayer for Fruitport, I object to my township paying tax dollars to subsidize the when-needed City of Muskegon request because you failed to staff your fire department properly. Lack of proper staffing has had a ripple effect that is now costing the taxpayers of other communities. I urge any citizen in their community to contact their board of commissioners and voice their concerns about their tax dollars subsidizing the services of the city because of improper staffing. City manager now says skyrocketing overtime, retiree health care, and pension costs are a big part of the problem with the fire department's budget. What caused that skyrocketing cost? First, the contractual leave time and approved by the department head and city manager to allow overtime to keep the minimum staff at 9. This went on for years. The lack of hiring budgeted personnel, number 2, because it was cheaper to hire overtime than to hire people. Thus, the high pensions, especially when you have an older workforce. Retiree health care is bargained for just like everything else. And as one who has received retiree health care for a while, it's nothing to brag about. Fire department budgeting in 11 and 12 were 35. That's what they were budgeted for. By the end of 11, it fell to 28 with retirements. Budgets from 12 to 13 and 13 and 14, where the department was budgeted for 28 personnel. But the leadership still approved 9 people per shift and wanted 9 people a shift. So that's where the overtime started. From January 12 to December of 14, a part-time program to increase staffing to temp agency in an attempt to keep the staffing levels up was tried but failed. The reasons: turnover, job duties that could not be performed by part-time people, high costs of the program, lack of applications, and especially the number of hours that could be worked by law. Only a few left were by the end of 14. There was a lot of wasted money in this program. The budget of 14 and 15 increased positions to 32, but no hiring occurred until after October. Months with a staff of 28 and a minimum of 9 was kept. A minimum of 9 was kept. That's what was ordered. That's why you saw all that overtime going on. And few part-timers, for which meant a lot of approved overtime. The years 15 to 18 all show that 35 people are budgeted for the city for the fire department. Currently, there are 27. So where did the budgeted money go? The leaders in the city are now blaming costs on the fire department members because of the decision by the director and manager and you, the commission. You're blaming fire department members for something you approved. The manager's plan is to rely on calling in part on-call, part-paid people and off-duty staff and mutual aid when needed, rather than hire additional firefighters. Those are his words.
1 minute, Count.
First, there are no paid on-call or part-time staff to call in, and they don't exist. They are not working on, when they are not working, they are contacted via text message, but not required to respond to the contract. So that leaves mutual aid from other departments that shouldn't have to spend tax dollars on bad decisions. The city manager wants to compare Norton to Muskegon. Norton Shores, there are no part-time employees during shift. There are 2 full-time personnel on responding engines, a command car, a deputy chief's car, and chief of the department, which also responds, like all other chiefs in the county, if they are needed 24/7. The initial response of 9 for a fire other than a large-scale incident. Calls for Norton Shores are 2,500 a year. Muskegon has at times, now let's see what Muskegon has at times, and the city wants to implement. 2 on an engine with a shift command riding in 1 engine, which means no command car and no rescue vehicle with specialized rescue equipment. Initial response of 6. The director of the fire department never responds to calls no matter how big, so he can't be counted in response. Although sometimes he calls just to see how things went. Basically, that's his involvement. Part of the job of command is to read a fire or large-scale emergency and prevent loss and harm. One question is, how will a command person on an engine answer a phone call if they're inside a burning building? Coordinate with those on scene or direct incoming fire departments. Without that person, it's only a matter of time before tragedy happens. Muskegon ran about 4,800 calls last year. The city manager says the structural changes inside the fire department with the goal of putting the right system in place. The question is, does he want to put the right system in place or his system in place that threatens the safety of the firefighters and citizens of the community? because the right system recognizes standards and existing examples that help keep your first responders safe and better serve the community. You have a responsibility to abide by the contracts, oversee city services, and hold accountable those in charge, and protect the citizens of the community. Are you?
Kevin Dake?
He's done.
Okay.
Sean? Are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sean Abbey. I live in Byron Center, Michigan. I represent the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union, and I've been involved with some of these negotiations that happened earlier this summer. A little bit about my background. I'd consider myself an expert in the fire service. I've been in the fire service for over 25 years, serving as a firefighter, a lieutenant, a captain, and I'm currently a battalion chief in a city very similar size to Muskegon. One thing, I have a whole thing kind of set here, but I kind of want to react to a couple of things around this slide. One, I thought it was interesting that your city manager admitted he's not an expert in the fire service, and you've got a police officer on your fire department. You'd think you'd reach out to the experts you have in the room, the fire experts, to come up with a good solution. Instead, we're talking to people that are coming up with cockamamie-brained ideas that just don't make sense from Muskegon. The 132,000, we've asked 3 times where that number comes from. Why are the fire numbers so high compared to everybody else? That's either mismanagement on somebody's spot in your shoes, whoever's a manager, to give them that kind of a huge number, or it's false. We have yet to get a reason why the fire number is so much higher than police and other general employees. But that's used against us. The other thing is all this stuff, this little dog and pony show that was interesting to listen to, which is just numbers that can be skewed any way you want, it's all management issues. They're blaming the firefighters and the union for things that are management issues. Yeah, you go back to that 3-person thing. The 3-person thing is something that was agreed to in a contract between both parties. And during negotiations, we did talk about those things, and we're willing to look at that. But those are all management issues. So now we're pointing at these guys. It's hilarious to listen to this, all these things, how bad everything is, when the person that can correct is right there. It's a management issue. We have a contract to follow, but we all agreed to that. The other thing, too, is that number, the firefighters took huge concessions recently. You guys are paying your starting firefighters less than I can make at Best Buy walking in the door. That's a disgrace. You think you're going to get good firefighters that way? But that equates to $136,000 a year? That my math must be off, because that's $11.50 an hour. I don't know if my math's off or yours is or whatever. Plus, they went to a defined contribution plan. Not hiring, going to that plan, that's going to skyrocket your defined benefit plan in the past. That's just common sense math. Any actuary will tell you that. I've heard a lot of things about ways you're going to solve this problem. One of them is using other departments in the area. Well, ask yourselves this when you have these conversations. What if the other departments around you staffed at the same poor level as you do? Oh, how would... You know, they all say, well, if Muskegon run with 6, then Norton Shores, we can run with 2. And Muskegon Township, we can run with 1. Well, who's going to be there to help if everyone decides to go to the lowest common denominator? Is that what you want for your public safety in this community? I don't think so. To that same point, and like they say, well, send me a bill. I've heard that before. Well, just send us your people, we'll send you a bill, send us a bill. Well, if Mrs. Jones is paying for the Muskegon Township or Muskegon Heights Fire Department to be next door, do you think she gives a damn if Muskegon's getting paid money for her fire department to be responding there when her house is burning? No. She wants them to be responding to her house because she's paying taxes there, not getting a check from Muskegon to run their calls. Lastly, Lastly, I'd like to just kind of finish with this. These are your firefighters. These guys would die for you. Any one of them. Every single day. We talked about soiling the relationship. I think that's a lot of soil you're throwing on the thing to start this whole thing off. So remember that when we're talking about collaborative and working together. And we're not up here throwing mud balls at people. But think about your firefighters, because they would do anything for any of you. They've got your back. They'd support you. They're asking for your support. Because 6 on duty is dangerous for your citizens, your firefighters, and anybody that does business in Muskegon. I only needed 3. I'll cut it short. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. Mr. Mark Sanders. Ann.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Vice Mayor,
Mr. Sanders.
and the City of Muskegon, the citizens. I am not from these parts, but thank you for allowing me to address Council and the citizens. I am Mark Sanders. I am the 8th District Vice President for the IAFF. I'm retired about a year, and I say about 20 pounds ago. That's why it's for young people, so you should consider making sure your ranks get turned over. But I put 34 years in Cincinnati, and also in other cities in similar in size. And we'll talk about that in a moment, because I was laid off from that city and ended up in Cincinnati. So with my 34 years experience, I now have left and retired, and I cover 5 states. And Michigan is one of them: Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. So I'm here tonight, obviously, to support firefighters, but I've been at this a long time, and in supporting firefighters, you really are supporting the community, because it goes hand in hand. A safely staffed and deployed fire department is inherently safe for the firefighters, but it's really the end result that you provide the maximum amount of safety for the citizens. So I'm here tonight to kind of cover a wide range of subjects. I got thrown off course by the presentation, but we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So I'm also a charter member from 2000 of this Wizard of Oz-ish thing you might be talking about, NFPA 1710 standard of staffing and employment of career fire departments. So I've been involved with that for 17 years. And that started much like this meeting can get a little contentious. But on that committee, you must know there are technical experts, scientists, which I am not one, fire chiefs, city managers. We have the entire spectrum, and yes, firefighters and labor leaders as well. So we have the entire spectrum that comes to work on a consensus document, but one that is an industry standard. So it's come about really through a lot of science that has been developed through that standard. So it is not one to be taken lightly when discussing and you're compartmentalizing of what you want your fire department to do. And yes, sir, one of them should be to show up to work. I agree with you. But I think you're being a little reckless, a little divisive. I think you're playing a little loose with the facts on how that happens. You can't reduce overall staffing with the same amount of people allowed off and expect to reach the same results of people on duty. You just can't do that. I understand that many of the things you identified were from 2014, 2015, and improvements have been made, and you can take credit maybe for some of the management decisions in keeping the budget in line. But I think it's a little unfair to go back 3 or 4 years and now try to fast forward into today's situation that you find yourself in and cast some blame when that contract probably was signed by some people in this room today. So I come almost that I've been here. We had a very tough negotiations one year in my experience. We never used attorneys, sorry, Mr. Counselor, but they're very valuable in negotiations. Per se, we never used them. We always negotiated in Cincinnati with the union president, the city. Long story short, we had a very volatile contract. After that, and leading up to that, we were the lowest staffed, the highest overtime, the worst morale ever in the history. So that's a recipe of how these things develop. You know what we did in the next negotiations? None of us said, we don't want to do that again. Because it was about digging in your heels, claiming your turf. And it wasn't about doing what's right for the organization. In 1994, we were the first fire unit, biggest city in the country, however you want to call it, that went to this new experiment of interest-based bargaining. Because in regular traditional negotiations, you conceal the bottom line. That's our jobs until we get to the end, and then we make agreements. Interest-based bargaining, you had to brainstorm. First, I had some training to build trust. That's really lacking here. To build trust, to work with one another, even though I don't know you. I might have heard about you, might not like you, Mr. Manager, but we built that trust. We did brainstorming then, and interest-based bargaining. Guess what? We came out with an agreement, the best agreement, the most staffing, the least use of overtime after things were adjusted, because we put 4 persons on each company. Out of that negotiations coming out of high overtime, high absenteeism, we increased staffing per company to the standard of 4. In the long term, after the adjustment of what that meant, you can't have a staff of 26 people and expect 9 people to be there every day, because that's all you have that are technically on the roster. And if you allow people off, which you should, very well stated, that makes for a high morale workforce. If you allow people off, you got a recipe for not meeting your goals. So I think there needs to be a reset button. I think, Council, you've talked about that. A lot of questions. How do we go from here? Certainly, this is not the best place to negotiate a contract. It's very tedious. You got to build a lot of trust to come up with good solutions. So, you know, moving from here, I would recommend that, I think a lot of citizens, I can't speak any more than the gentleman said here, or this gentleman said here, about building a team, having citizens input. Certainly they want the safest fire department they can get. But when it comes to that contract, that should be done right here in this setting, in good faith and with some trust. And it's my understanding in that premise, because it's been discussed here that, and I know that council's asked some questions, so maybe you need to dig in a little further into the facts, but it's my understanding last summer, there was at least one meeting, whether it was in negotiations or we're going to see if we want to negotiate or we want to have a midterm change. And I understand that there was things discussed and potentially put forward to help alleviate this 3 persons off a day. But I understand that died. And it looks like the council may have not been informed that that may have been under discussion. So when you look at all that, $134,000, that's, unless you have a lot of legacy costs, and I'd certainly, ma'am, Council Commissioner Warren, I would like to, or whoever asks for the facts on it, I would certainly like to see some of that too. But $132,000, that would be the most I've seen anywhere. So I gave some observations. I kind of went off script, kind of bounced. Why am I here when I cover cities like Chicago, Detroit, Cincinnati, Cleveland? Because it matters. The cities of Muskegon on the go are the backbone not only of the country, but really the firefighters union. These are our locals. 40 to 60 members. 40 to 50,000 population in the city. As I said, I was laid off from a city of 40,000. Our staffing was about 65, I believe. They cut down to 35 when 1983, when the recession hit. I was laid off a year, I ended up in Cincinnati, thank goodness. But they're back. They're about 60 members. Everybody's bouncing back from the recession. And when I look at the budget of the city, and I see an $8 million carryover, about a 29% of the general fund generally. I think about $27 million in expenditures last year. In fact, you were up a couple million. From your projected budget, you went up a couple million in your, what came in, and you went up a couple million in what you expended, I believe in 17. So you have an $8 million carryover. Some of it may be a little restricted, but I think it's mostly $8 million. That's about 29%. Thank you. It's about 29%. That equates to the carryover that you're going to be mutual aiding with. So you claim that your budget's so tight in the fire department, but you're holding all this carryover, and then you want to utilize those with less budget availability to supplement your operations. I just think there needs to be a lot of unpeeling of the onion. Again, maybe a reset. I know Sean, a little passionate, but he's a good leader that understands you got to have cooperation. That's 10 seconds. Talk about budget. That 10 seconds, a little uncomfortable, not so bad. Probably glad I quit. In that 10 seconds, fire grows by 1/3. Gotcha. Doubles every 30 seconds. So we can talk budgets, but the only numbers that matter are 911. And when a person like me who may have their grandchildren over and I get out, but I can't get down the hallway because that smoke is just choked down, and I'm on the lawn and I'm calling 911, I need a staffed and properly deployed fire department to show up, get up in that second floor window and grab my granddaughter. And I would hope that the citizens would understand that staffing and deployment are keys. They are keys, and everybody just needs to get more educated on what it means to have an industry standard. Because that is a prudent industry standard, and you try to at least try to measure yourself on that. You're not going to get there probably, but you can at least attempt to be open-minded and discuss issues that will get you there, not one-way agreements that if you would be in the city manager's budget, everything would be okay. That's not necessarily the case. So I'm here to provide any resources that we can provide from Washington, D.C. I don't know if you ever tried to apply for SAFER grants, federally funded staffing. I don't know if you tried to apply for AFG grants, that you can apply for anything from fire equipment to breathing apparatus that may take some pressure off your capital budget. But we can bring resources to help with negotiations. We can bring resources to help try to find additional funds. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory Roberts.
Gregory Roberts, 3340 Wilcox Avenue, Muskegon, Michigan, the home that I love. First of all, one of those lifting accidents that you so talked about, I am the only firefighter left that got injured on the job that is living. And my surgery is coming up March 21st. The good thing about that is that I got hurt on the job doing one of those lifting things. I got hurt on the job, but I knew what I was taking in. And I don't want to see one of my friends die. I knew what I was taking in, and so be it. On January the 5th from the township, Dear Frank, I am disheartened by your recent comments regarding the city's position on mutual aid and fire. And then I am like Commissioner Warren, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner German, that we've talked about transparency. The mayor, you've talked earlier about being in control. Well, now, and I want to remind you of something that the last time we talked is that this fire department was not for sale, and it was not going to go to the heights and not going to go. Now, guess what was in place? And let me remind you, all commissioners, by the way, the last time I was here talking about bargaining in good faith, me and the public safety director talked about this issue already back then. It was already going to be discussed. So you talk about that they're not working with you. How about you work with them? I dare to tell you that there's a lot that each of you don't know because you guys are not talking. There was one commissioner one time came, Clara Shepard, and wore fire gear just to see what it was. You come to the fire station and be there for 24 hours and see how it is. And I got your hand. That day that they had 6 firefighters and I reported on it, they had one parade that they knew that they were going to have in Lakeside. They had a hazmat accident. They had 2 fires, and they had 6 guys, and they had to call somebody else from the heights to come in. That was the numbers. So what do you guys want? The next person might not be so lucky. I hurt my back. You want somebody to lose their life?
Thank you, Greg. Mr. Tim Wolfus?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Wolfus. I reside at 1370 Palmer. I'm a neighbor of the mayor. I would like to beat the staffing levels. Don't think that's going to get much worse. It's already been beat. I'm here as far as my safety goes. 6 firefighters on a shift, requested 9. I think it could be better than that. So you have 3 trucks within the whole city of Muskegon. There's a structure fire, say for instance, Appleton 31. All of the city of Muskegon responds. Who does that leave to protect me on the west end of Muskegon? Nobody. Mutual aid? Well, they're 12 minutes away. In that 12 minutes, like he said, a fire doubles every 30 seconds. Within 6 minutes, that's 2,000 square feet of fire that started out as a pan on fire on your stove. To me, that concerns me. What do I do as a citizen when my house is on fire, my family's inside being threatened to burn to death, and I have nobody to respond? They're 12 minutes away. And I don't know where you got your numbers from as far as the fire department responding to unlock a vehicle. They don't do that. The police department would do that if there was a child locked inside. Fire department would respond if there was a medical emergency. I don't understand that. Your numbers are incorrect. And if you want us to believe that the numbers are correct, show us. Provide that proof. If McDonald's manager doesn't do his job, cannot manage his employees to get them to do what they should be doing, what happens to that employee? They're gone. Maybe you guys should take that into consideration. It's not fair as far as public safety goes. Thank you. It's not fair to the firefighters. And when you start running low staffing levels, you increase the amount that the firefighters have to produce to save that individual, to run on that emergency medical call. So yes, they can call in sick. they can take vacation whenever they want. Firefighter X that like to take his vacation during the summer, that's his choice. That's in your contract. You need to adjust that. Personally, I like my vacation in October. What is stopping me from doing that? Nothing. I mean, I don't know what else you guys need to hear to increase the staffing levels. But when that one person dies because there's not an appropriate amount of firefighters on shift, the city would like to pay for that, wouldn't they? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tim.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Do firefighters bid on vacation days before the year starts?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
William Blakeman.
Are all the firemen?
What I have up here for right now.
Okay.
So I'm running through my request lists.
William Blakeman, 3358 Wilcox. I was here a while, maybe a month ago, and I was concerned about the DEQ in critical dunes. And you assured me that the city couldn't override the DEQ on matters of the critical dunes. So I was satisfied with that. And then just recently, we got a notice from the DEQ that the city of Muskegon had, it says, well actually it's from Mr. Peterson. It said to the DEQ, I have met with representatives of Damfino Development, LLC, and received a copy of the Critical Dune Area application for 1875 Waterworks Road, Muskegon, Michigan. We are in support of the referenced application and special exception request. Now, who knew about that? We didn't, and the only way we knew about it was because the DEQ, we've got an agreement with the DEQ that if anything happens down there with the critical dune, that we'll be notified. So, you know, first of all, we had no input into it, and I gave you a little history of the DEQ years ago. And so I was just surprised that Muskegon was in support of their application. Did you discuss it?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, this is the input point. So we weren't to the public input point yet. Damfinos did ask me to submit a letter of support, and I did, because holistically, if they meet the standard of the critical dune ordinance, then yeah, we would be supportive of it. But at no point in there did we say we would be supportive if they didn't meet the standard. And the expectation after we talked to them was that regardless of my letter, there was going to be a public hearing, and there was a long process that's going to take place. And the letter is really no different than anything we do for. I mean, to you it's different because it's something you really care about, but it's no different than any amount of letters of recommendation and support we write, you know, all the time for groups that ask us to support something that they're trying to do in the community. This one obviously is different because it's really important to you, but I do those, you know, I don't want to say dozens of them a year, but we do a number of them, you know, throughout the year. People are looking to do something somewhere, or get a grant for something, or have a special event. You know, management writes, you know, does those letters.
The mayor.
Or the mayor does them on a number of occasions too.
Saw this plan. You did?
I saw.
Yeah, their proposal, or
Right, their concept.
their concept.
Their concept.
Well, I would like to, if you look at this, they want to put a road through the dune and do all this and so forth.
Right, and that's what they'd have to sell the DEQ on, or...
Yeah.
Right.
But where's the road go to?
To a housing development.
There's no housing development.
Right.
Where's the proposal?
So that's just it. This is preliminary, and there's going to have to be public hearings at the DEQ level. And if there is going to be a proposal for housing, then there's going to be multiple public hearings, at the planning stage.
Okay.
This is all strictly, if it passes muster, we'd be supportive in, looking at this if it can come to, fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna have multiple layers, and, who knows if they, carry through and actually, develop a project. So
Okay.
it's a matter of they're getting their ducks in a row and contacting Lansing. So.
Alrighty. Okay.
Okay.
Just a note about that, I think we got an email on December 26th about that.
Right.
It was basically outlining the process and some of their suggestions and what the process is going to be for the critical dune part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Mr. Larry Page. Larry, you're asking for 10 as part of an organization, right?
Yes, please. I hope I won't. I'll try to be brief. I sense some skepticism. Always being the teacher, I have I think it's one. I think I have nothing to add.
Thanks, Gregory.
Mr. Peterson has it.
Thank you.
My name is Larry Page, and live at 3328 Wilcox, and I represent a nonprofit called Pigeon Hill Alliance, and we're an environmental organization. Part of our charter is to keep an eye on what's going on our critical dunes in the city of Muskegon. And last week, toward the end, the week before, I got a packet from the DEQ through our lawyer, who we have a standing FOIA with the DEQ to let us know about any permits that are taken out for anything that has to do with development on the dunes. And in checking on this, it looked like the Dan Fino's Development, which basically is a brand new organization, never having done any development before, never having built anything, was proposing a road to go over a part of the dune down in the Bluffton area. That road is, I'm going to say maybe a quarter mile to a half mile long, and it starts at the intersection of Wilcox and Plum and Waterworks, and goes over the critical dune, over and through the critical dune, and ends just inside of the property owned by Sand Products. We knew that was coming. It had been staked out and surveyed. We knew that something was happening down there. So I looked into it and talked to Nancy Kuncannon, the MDEQ compliance officer in Grand Rapids, and she said that yes, they had put in for an application to put that road in, and that that week, this was last week on Wednesday, and on Friday of last week there was going to be a meeting, and the city had already signed off on it. The city had okayed that project in their estimation because of the city manager's letter that Mr. Blakeman referenced. And hearing no objection or other comments from anybody else, there's a good possibility that project might be approved. So, and I find in talking to her, she said that if we could get a couple of people to ask for a public hearing prior to that meeting on Friday, that meeting would be put off until the public hearing happened. So I got on our Beechwood Bluffton webpage, Facebook page, and put out a call for people to, see if I could find 2 people to sign up, and we got about 30, right? And that was at noon on Wednesday, and by 2:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, I got an email from Mrs. Kunkanen saying that we had the 2 that we needed, and there would be a public hearing scheduled. And I understand that public hearing has been scheduled for the 20th of February, and it's scheduled for this room, right? I'm going to suggest to Mrs. Kunkanen that this room is far too small to hold the number of people that I believe will be interested in coming to that public hearing. Right? We're going to need a lot bigger room than this. But at any rate, I just want to give you commissioners some of the information and his comments on the Facebook. Commissioner Johnson said that, and this is on Thursday, I believe, that he hadn't heard about this. The commission had not heard about this. There had been no discussion about this. There certainly had been no vote about this. And he suggested that we needed some public hearing and some discussion on this before it went on. So there will be some discussion. The public hearing will take place, and people will discuss it. I think it's unfortunate that basically the city has signed off on this and given their approval in the form of the city manager's letter. And he can say what he wants about it, but in talking to Mrs. Kunkanen, she said this basically constitute approval. And it's very clear in the letter that the city approves of this without any studies, without any public input, whatever. So I'm sorry, commissioners, that you've been left out of the loop. You have not had a chance to comment or to vote to give your approval, but it's gone past that now. So we will certainly be here, hopefully not here, but in wherever they set up the public hearing, and we'll be pointing out some things about this road that it's a substandard road. You should know. The city engineer has said so. It's too narrow. It's too steep. Associated pathway for pedestrians next to the road, too narrow, too steep, not ADA, right? So a lot of things going against it. Besides going over an incursion into our critical dunes, for basically, as we see it, and we hear now, there will be studies, there will be a proposal, there will be that, and I've been in this town since 1967, and I've heard that on a regular basis. There will be something happening down there, but we haven't seen anything forthcoming. So we'll. I hope that all of you are able to come to that meeting. It'll be as I said, the 20th of February, and we'll have our say, and we'll see how the DEQ feels about it and what they say what they have to say about it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor? No, I just wanted to clarify,
Okay.
if I may, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Thank you, Commissioner Rinsma-Stephenga, for directing me to December 26th. I did locate that email. It was sent the day after Christmas, lost in the holiday shuffle. I did not see it. So to clarify, we were notified that that letter was sent and of the plans. And so I must apologize for having misspoke on that and not having seen this email. I did take issue with the emails saying we support this without there actually being discussion amongst the commission about it. I reserve judgment. I'm not for or against what the request is. I look forward to learning more about it, hearing public comment, also hearing what DEQ's findings are. But we were indeed informed of this, and he indicated